All right, so thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm Emily Green, Director of Member Engagement and Events. We're really excited to share the results of our 2020 cleanup today, especially since this was a very different year from previous years because of the pandemic. So just quickly before I pass this off to Anthony Allen, our Assistant Director of Ecological Restoration, I want to make a few quick comments. Just let everybody know that we are recording, so I'll ask you all to please stay muted for the duration of the webinar. We're going to hear from Anthony, then open up to Q&A at the end. But as we go along, you can type any questions you have into the chat box. And then just real quick, I'm sure that you are all being really bombarded with requests for support this time of year, but bear with me because we're going to give you one more. So for those of you who may not be as familiar with Save the Sound, we're a nonprofit leading environmental action in the Long Island Sound region. And it's really because of supporters and members that we're able to continue fighting crucial environmental battles and provide informative webinars like this one. So if you want to help us keep fighting for your backyard in the year ahead, we'd really appreciate your support to make that happen. You can go to savethesound.org/donate to make a gift, and I will also put that in the chat box. And now that that pitch is done, I'm going to turn this over to Anthony.
All right. Thank you, Emily, and hello, everybody. This is our last webinar of 2020. What a year it's been. Really extraordinary in a lot of different ways, including impact that it's had on our cleanup effort and on a lot of our other programming. So super appreciative of so many of you on this call, a lot of whom we recognize and count as supporters and partners. Really appreciative of the way you've continued your own work and the way that you've adapted and the way that you've supported us as we do the same. It's been a year to come together and a year to build resilience in the entire environmental movement. So really grateful for all of you. Just wanted to start off by saying that. Yeah, so today we're gonna go through some of our results and some of what we navigated this year during our cleanup effort. So as Emily mentioned, my name is Anthony Allen. I'm the Assistant Director of Ecological Restoration here at Save the Sound. And our ecological restoration program really houses and runs the cleanup effort, even though it's related certainly to our Clean Waters program as well. And we've been doing this for quite some time. And the fact is that this year was extraordinary, and we felt it was worth giving you this early look, even as we continue to process data and to think about what it might mean, to give you an early look and view into how it went this year. Some of you may have joined us, some of you may have supported in other ways. Just want to give you this look. Now, into it, cleanups. So our cleanup program is affiliated with the Ocean Conservancy's global effort, which is called the International Coastal Cleanup. They've been running that for over 30 years now, and they work with different partner organizations in each area. So we are one of two organizations in the state of Connecticut who partners with the Ocean Conservancy every year in the month of September when they do their International Coastal Cleanup effort. We do our own more localized effort to coordinate and share all the data and results with them so that they can tally that up on a global level and give us a sense of what's happening and the trends we're seeing in terms of trash and engagement with these issues. I also want to shout out Connecticut River Conservancy, who's the other partner that the Ocean Conservancy works with. Kelsey, who works for them in Connecticut, is on the call right now. So appreciate all of their efforts in this realm too. Our effort, we refer to as the Connecticut Cleanup. We used to just use the International Coastal Cleanup name, and we transitioned recently because we started to bring more of a focus to the fact that this is not a purely coastal effort, and it's not a purely coastal issue. This is an issue which affects all of us and is caused by all of us. We all have a hand in it. So one of the things we like to say is that trash travels. And that's very true. A lot of the most common and harmful forms of trash that we see in marine debris is easily transportable on wind and on water and through our pipes and sewer systems. And it can find its way from really anywhere into Long Island Sound. And there's an example that our soundkeeper Bill Lucy likes to use where he says, well, if I flicked a cigarette butt out my window in Quebec, it could end up in Long Island Sound. So this idea that we're all part of a watershed, that the Long Island Sound watershed is very large, and that hydrology that connects us also connects a lot of different rivers and populations to Long Island Sound, as well as their trash. So we've been coordinating this effort in Connecticut since 2002, and we were excited to do it again this year. And once again, a shout out to Subaru of New England, who returned as a sponsor for the statewide effort this year. Really a year of so much uncertainty. So we were really grateful that they joined us and we were able to make this happen again. It's really due to their support that we're able to get so many people out and make this the kind of effort that it is. And it was quite a different effort this year. 2020, I mean, I don't need to tell anyone on this call what kind of year 2020 has been. We feel like we've been constantly pivoting this year, trying to find our footing in terms of what's possible, what's not possible, what's safe, what isn't safe. And so these bullet points here are really just a fraction of the story of what changed from 2019 to 2020. There was so much that happened behind the scenes. Annalisa Paltov, who works on our team and coordinates this effort for us, just did a tightrope act and really did a fantastic job of pulling this together. So you can see in 2019, and what we'll call a quote unquote normal year, we were able to put together 73 in-person cleanup events in Connecticut. We brought out over 2,500 volunteers. That almost all of that happened in the month of September, and it was focused on a single day of action, which is Ocean Conservancy usually designates an International Coastal Cleanup Day within the month of September. That, I believe, last year was the 21st, September 21st. But it was a huge day, a huge month. We picked up together more than 6,000 pounds of trash, or 3 tons. So it was a great effort. We got great weather. That's what we'd expect in a normal year. 2020, we didn't know whether this was going to happen at all. So the fact that we were able to make a number of adaptations and pull together 41 cleanup events, that's a combination of virtual and in-person. I'll say a little bit more about what virtual was in a little bit, and still got almost 1,500 volunteers involved. So all of you who came out, really, we were so impressed and candidly shocked at the turnout and very pleased. The effort stretched over basically 3 months this year. It was a little harder to find a start and an end, and there was no designated International Coastal Cleanup Day this year. The Ocean Conservancy basically said the whole month of September counted, and we extended that on either end to accommodate more folks getting involved. And we actually picked up more trash by weight this year, about 7,500 pounds, which is incredibly impressive. The weight and the total weight is a little bit hard to calculate and stand by, but it's a good sort of rough number to give us a sense of the scale of the effort in the year. So getting into the data, before we get into specifics on what we found in 2020, there's a lot of things that changed even just within the effort itself, or within the way the Ocean Conservancy managed it. We had 3 new categories that only showed up on the CleanSwell app and were not finalized in time to be included on the paper form data forms. So folks who filled out the paper data form didn't have these categories. Folks who filled out on the app, I'll get to other changes there in a minute, but they did have access to these categories. And notably, this included gloves and masks. So we were looking at PPE and the occurrence of PPE. And I wish we'd had time to get it on all the data form, all the paper data forms. That would give us a really good idea of how much was being found. But as you'll see later on, it was pretty significant all the same. The other change is that for the app, several categories of trash were combined. So fishing gear, which in the paper form this year and in past years has been broken out into 3 or 4 different types of equipment and gear, line, rope, netting, that kind of thing, was combined into fishing gear. It's a similar story across all these categories. I think that other packaging is notable because that sort of brought together everything from like oil cans to cleaner containers to 6-pack rings. So these are now capturing a broader array of trash. And so that's when we get into the data, it was interesting to look and sort of think about how that the combination of those factors in one mode of recording and not the other affected our results this year. So this was perhaps the biggest change 2019 to 2020 is we introduced the virtual cleanup format. This is something we actually piloted with Future Frogmen and Patagonia of Westport. we piloted this in June. They brought the idea to us and we happily joined on and gave it a shot. And we set it up to be essentially that there would be a virtual kickoff event that we did that time over Microsoft Teams. We did it several times subsequently on Zoom, where we'd get everyone together. We'd sort of provide this energy, this background. Bill Lucy, our soundkeeper, would join and give this great presentation on plastics and the importance of addressing them at the source and the role that each of us could play in the mitigation of plastic pollution. And then we'd walk through, okay, how do you participate in a virtual cleanup? What does that even mean? And essentially that meant that instead of everyone getting together in one spot and cleaning up a given area, we encouraged folks to instead join us for one of these kickoffs, download the CleanSwell app from the Ocean Conservancy, and then with people they lived with and or a very small group, we said 2 to 4 people, would go out and clean up a place in their community. We recommended green spaces and riverside areas that were public access. Go out and pick up trash there and record their data in the CleanSwell app. So we actually had a pretty good uptake on that this year. It was the first year that we've really pushed the CleanSwell app for recording data. And so that was another consideration that affected a lot of different things, perhaps most notably for the sake of our data and the way that we analyze trends. It affected how we thought about or how we recorded the number of cleanups. I'll talk about that in a minute, but it makes things a little bit more complex, a little bit more interesting when we get to sort of trying to tease out storylines from the data. So this is a look at the CleanSwell entries from this year with the group name Save the Sound, which is how we sort of tallied together all of our virtual cleanup participants and our digital cleanup participants and separated those from those of like the Connecticut River Conservancy or other independent groups. And it was, as you can see, it was a really broad geographic uptake and use of the app. I did a little bit of I made up some little awards over here on the side. And, you know, as you can see, the most volunteers using CleanSwell came from New London County, Most trash recorded by weight and clean swell was in New Haven County. And then we had folks from Nassau and Westchester County. We had a couple of folks in Newport County, and even some folks up in Massachusetts. So this was the first year that that people participated in with Save the Sound in this effort, no matter where they were. It wasn't dependent on there being a formal or official cleanup event where you were. And so I think that that contributed to our volunteer numbers being as high as they were. I think it also certainly contributed to our weight and to the data that we wound up with. So we can start to get into this now. So these are some of the high level findings from 2020. There were some significant changes in storylines here. First and foremost, cigarette butts were dethroned. Cigarette butts in past years have always been the most common item, and by a lot, or by a significant margin. Last year, there were more than 30,000 cigarette butts picked up over the 73 cleanups. And this year, as you can see, under 10,000. Plastic pieces continue to rise. That's probably our area of biggest concern right now, given all of the harm that comes with microplastics in our waters and the accumulation of that, bioaccumulation in the food chain. These plastics are making it back to us, and in the process, they're killing a lot of wildlife and disrupting ecosystems. So that's a really big concern for us, and something that is going to take a lot of concerted efforts on a lot of different fronts to start to cut that back. Food wrappers, balloons, gloves and masks, and strapping bands are all examples of things where, again, there's no causality in this data, but we do look at the trends and the way things are changing from year to year and try and tease out, well, why could that be happening? And again, no causality, but it's I would say, plausible to think that this increase in food wrappers, in certainly in gloves and masks, but in strapping bands, we saw a huge, these are like from packages. We saw a huge increase there this year. And one thought is that the COVID-19 lifestyle, the way that that's changing the way that we live, may be impacting some of these categories that we're seeing more and more of. So balloons, certainly more outdoor events this year. Gloves and masks are ubiquitous, as we know, for good reason, but too many of them are ending up on the ground. I know we all see this when we go out, even grocery shopping or really anywhere. And strapping bands, perhaps more prevalent this year due to more folks staying at home and having more deliveries made. So that's the kind of thing that we try and look at and pull out. But all of those are items of concern. And so when we look at how some of these categories compare to years past, that's where the stories really start to take on a little bit of weight, and where we can start to put together, well, does it make sense? Can we figure out why this might have happened, why this occurrence might this rise or fall in occurrence might have happened? And I should note, to harken back to what I said earlier about the impact that virtual cleanups have on our cleanup numbers, to avoid sort of skewed or misleading information about, how many item we get in a given year and how that compares to past years, we adjust the data in a given year based on the number of cleanups. So that roughly correlates, although we have been seeing an increase in the number of volunteers per cleanup, which is fantastic. It gives us a better sense of the prevalence of each of these items in a given area. So whenever there's a cleanup, what's the likelihood that or what is the occurrence of each of these items on a per cleanup basis. So that's the way we adjust the data. And when you have, 41 cleanups and then a lot of other people in different areas picking up trash in pairs or in small groups, it can skew that a little bit to suggest that there was more of an increase on a per cleanup basis because we didn't count each of those pairs of people going out as their own cleanup. So these may be a little bit skewed high for some of this data per cleanup this year. So I just want to note that up front. But even with that said, plastic bags, something we all care about, something we all look at a lot. We had plastic bag bans passed on a statewide level in both New York and Connecticut. And I know here in Connecticut, they had just gone into effect when COVID hit. And so as soon as the bags were removed from the stores, they came back to the stores. There was a lot of concern early on. There was a lot that wasn't known about how long the virus lived on surfaces and whether it was safe to use reusable bags. We now know that it is, but at the time there was this pause put. It was really a retreat to single-use plastics and materials as a way of saying, okay, anything that anyone touched, we'll just throw it away. And so plastic bags came back to the stores. They're still there in most places. It's either plastic or paper, but in a lot of places, it's plastic. And so where we saw a precipitous drop from 2018 to 2019, it rose again and then some in 2020, the occurrence of plastic bags. So this is really concerning. It's something that hopefully is not a trend we'll see continue, but really stood out to us this year. Fishing gear, another one which is notable for its threat to marine life. I know our soundkeeper, Bill Lucy, is really concerned and working with several other groups on the ghost fishing problem in Long Island Sound, which is abandoned traps on the bottom of the sound, which continue to fish and catch different species. They die in the trap and then more species come in to eat them. They die in the trap and it just continues. And there's hundreds of thousands of these on the bottom of the sound at this point. So there's issues like that, but then there's threats from recreational fishing gear and line and other commercial gear that washes up. So we keep an eye on this one too. And the 2020 decrease may be exaggerated because this was one of the combined groups for data this year. And we're not sure how people chose to record that and how that might have skewed the data. So that's something that while we like to see the decrease, it's not a huge decrease, and we're still going to be watching this one for sure for in the future. Plastic containers. This is like takeout containers, but it's also food containers. And we had seen a 3-year, year-over-year decrease from 2017 to 2019, and we're feeling pretty good about that. But certainly a huge uptick this year, more than can be explained by the number of cleanups issue I described earlier. So this is something that we might suppose is due in part at least to COVID-19 and the fact that if you're eating at restaurants, most people are doing takeout, and there's a draw to sort of picnic and do takeout and eat that outdoors, and just an overall increase in the use of these single-use containers. So that's something certainly that we're concerned about, not only because of just this big increase, but because of what that means in downstream effect. Thinking about how microplastics become microplastics. They don't start that way most of the time. Some of them do, but a lot of it's also larger pieces of plastic degrading and turning into smaller pieces of plastic. And so we don't like to see these large large pieces of plastic making their way to Long Island Sound or to any of our waterways. Cigarette butts, as I mentioned, they're tricky. There hasn't been, at least here, I know there is in, I believe it's Australia and some other places, there's a concerted like public messaging effort around not dropping cigarette butts on the ground, but I haven't seen at least much of that done here yet. And I know like New Jersey has laws around against smoking on public beaches or on beaches. But again, I'm not sure that we have those laws here. I could be mistaken, but we certainly find a lot of them. And this is huge for us, not only because there's a lot of reasons, a lot of ways that cigarette butts do harm. First of all, they have a lot of toxins in them. These are the filters really that we're talking about. And they've sort of accumulated all of the toxins as you smoke the cigarette. They're also plastic. So they're an acetate, and this is something that it's like a hidden killer, like and a hidden source of microplastics. I think is we see them and we think, oh, it's kind of like paper, but it's actually plastic. And so there's another source of plastic into the water, and it also mimics food and little fish when they're floating or when they're in the water. And so there's a good for species to eat cigarette butts, filling up their gut, and then again we have bioaccumulation, but we also have sort of a clogging of the digestive tract in that way. So again, when we talk about trash travels, this is one of the biggest ones we're talking about. And even though it dropped this year, still huge numbers of these, and something that we're going to be thinking about how we might start to message against this and get a handle on it. Strapping bans, I mentioned these and the potential explanation of just more packages being shipped. If anyone has tracked a package recently, it's a new kind of torment. Not having any real clue when they're going to come and arrive. The USPS and other carriers are just swamped right now. And that's the Christmas season, but it's also just an extraordinary season, an extraordinary year where that's concerned. So this could be part of that. I know that I recently received a package with strapping bands on it. So you got to keep an eye out for that. This is it's a potential source of strangulation in sea animals. So it's definitely a threat to marine life. And then balloons, we'll talk about that for a moment. Earlier in the year, Soundkeeper Bill Lucy gave us a sort of a picture of what this was looking like on Long Island Sound. And he was seeing balloons everywhere. So many of them. Just has a special net for pulling them out of the water, but just all kinds of balloons floating on the surface, just really, really dangerous. It's a choking hazard for wildlife. And again, this is something that, certainly a lot of events moved outside this year, a lot of celebrations moved outside this year, and a lot of those have balloons associated with them. And there's been events where, a major feature of the event is a balloon release. It's this big, awe-inspiring moment where we're releasing hundreds of balloons. Please don't do that. If you can find another way to celebrate, we encourage folks to do that, because those balloons are ending up in Long Island Sound and they're killing wildlife. So again, something that we think part of that increase may be due to a lifestyle change during COVID-19, but certainly a concerning increase for something that we've been tracking, keep an eye on. So going forward, obviously there's some good news this year with the great number of volunteers that turned out, the amount of trash we were able to pick up, even in this under the circumstances. But there's also some concerning news, as you've just heard, and some concerning trends. So we'd love more people to get involved next year and to help us expand this effort, especially to inland communities. Again, we've mostly been doing in-person cleanups on the coast. with Subaru of New England, we've been moving some of those inland around where their dealerships are, but we'd love to have people in inland communities that are not coastal, but are all part of a watershed. We'd love to have more folks step up and volunteer to be cleanup captains. We love our cleanup captains. Annalisa works very closely with them, and we've built very strong, 10 plus year relationships, almost 20 at this point with some of them. So love to have more people step up to be cleanup captains 2021. If you want to do that, you can reach out to Annalisa. There's her email right there, apaltoff@savethesound.org. In our own lives, of course, continue to refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle in that order. And then, we say with the bucket and the tap. So this is the bucket we're talking about. This is, this waste is already in the environment. We need to get it out to keep it from doing further damage. So that's the bucket. The tap is largely policy and our own reduction of use in our own lives. So support single-use bans on styrofoam, on plastic. There's a lot of styrofoam is another one we saw a big increase in this year. So we need to support policy and policymakers who are taking this seriously and implementing bans. And we need to make sure that even through COVID, that these bans are enforced and upheld whenever it's safe to do so. So with that, this is our vision. Here's our social media. Check us out. But Emily, I don't know if there were questions that came through. I saw some chat lighten up. But if folks have questions, I'm happy to do my best to answer them. There may be folks on the line too who have even better knowledge of some of these things than I do. But please.
More comments than questions, but I have a few questions to kick it off.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a quick question about the app. So the app is still, I believe it's still live and it's still in use by Ocean Conservancy, but is Save the Sound tracking results through the year if we continue to use Save the Sound as the group name?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we did this year, working with Connecticut River Conservancy and Ocean Conservancy, is we defined sort of geographic areas within that app. So if you're in the Connecticut River watershed and you open the app, you're going to see the Connecticut River Conservancy's logo. And if you're anywhere else in the state, you'll open the app and you'll see Save the Sound's logo, and it'll auto populate the group name to be Save the Sound or CRC, I believe. And if you keep those group names the same, then we'll be able to continue tracking that data easily and pulling down reports. And we encourage you, whenever you're out walking or taking a visit, if you pick trash up, or if you want to, organize a cleanup in your neighborhood or your community, please do so. And if you use the app to do it, it'll submit the data not only to Ocean Conservancy, but also to us. And that all helps us to understand when and where trash is being found and dealt with. So yeah, for sure. And the other thing I'll say about the app too, to its credit, is they basically have assigned a weight to each type of trash that's based on like the average item that they would expect to be found in that category. And so in a lot of ways, in a lot of categories, the weight of trash when submitted through CleanSwell is actually more accurate than just sort of estimating, doing your, like holding your bag and trying to figure it out. Some cleanup captains, we encourage this, bring scales to their sites. But if you're not going to, bring it home to your scale, or if you're not at a site that does that, the CleanSwell app will sort of automatically produce a weight for you. So yeah, we encourage continued use of it. And we encourage cleanups year round for sure.
So do you have any tips for people who want to continue doing cleanups year round on, best practices, how to do it? I asked because I did a virtual cleanups for this year, and I wore gloves when I did them. However, there were things I still didn't want to touch, even with gloves on. So I hadn't considered what an alternative would be, but I don't know if you have any suggestions on what people could do at home.
Yeah, gloves for sure. Especially right now, please don't do a cleanup without gloves. Uh, I'd say there's a couple points to make here as far as doing this safely and effectively. The first is you can buy like trash grabbers that allow you to just sort of reach out and grab it with this grabber instead of your hand. Also, this year was the first time that I saw this, but there was a gentleman at Rocky Neck State Park who actually brought a metal detector to the beach, and he had like the metal detector in one hand, his phone with the app, and a trash bag in the other. And he was like going around the beach and finding the stuff that no one else was able to see. So that's an interesting thought too, if you're into that. And then the final thing I'll say is if you come across large items, like there's always a number of appliances. This year there was a steel rail from a coaster, from like a roller coaster, that was found. So if you find large, bulky, difficult to move items, leave them. Don't hurt yourself trying to get them. Leave them and either let us know or let a group or someone in your town know who can help take that out and dispose of it properly.
Okay, we have a question from Kelsey. You mentioned an outreach campaign about cigarette butts, and it does seem like there's a disconnect between someone littering and that littering becoming marine debris. How do you think advocates can leverage data to lead to behavioral changes? And do you think reducing marine debris will come from individuals changing their behaviors or more from policy changes and bans?
It's great questions. I think that there's a lot more power in efforts that are done using like community-based social marketing and other sort of commitment-based processes and public commitments than just sort of imparting information and hoping people change their behavior on their own. So there are campaigns that I think can be effective, especially when targeted at a specific item of trash that's well understood, or that we can understand how or when it's being disposed of or littered. So I do think that that's a possibility. I think that I think it's a both and. I think it's the bucket and the tap. Yes, I think behavior change is potentially a good way to go at these things. And I think it's worthwhile if you can find interventions that make sense and are not going to, just take forever and be really costly. But obviously, policy and especially enforceable policy is a much faster route at times to getting this stuff done. So, single-use bans and bans in terms of specific behaviors. I know there's balloon release bans in certain places now along the Sound. So that's definitely a way that we advocate for these changes to happen more quickly. And the last thing I'll say there is that, we use this data that we get. Bill and others use this when they go and advocate and lobby for legislation during the session here in Connecticut. So it's all connected, and behavior change and policy change are also connected.
Very true. Question from Allison: were volunteers asked to separate recyclables from the trash? If so, how to convey information about what is recyclable and what isn't? I don't know about previous years, but I'll say this year personally, I was not interested in pulling out recyclables that came from unknown locations with unknown viruses on them. So, but that is an interesting question of maybe past years.
Yeah, so we don't do that, or we don't coordinate that as Save the Sound. I know that there's a couple reasons for that. One is that what is and is not accepted as recyclables differs in different locations, and it's would really be sort of an impossible task for us to try and not just convey that, but also accurately and keep up with it, but also not impossible, just a very heavy lift. But also to then, try and provide and coordinate the disposal, the proper disposal of those things that are recyclable. So it's unfortunate, and it's something that very open to ideas on how to do that effectively, and how to work with groups that we coordinate to do that more effectively. But for the time being, no, we as Save the Sound don't do that. I know there are groups that do cleanups with us, that do lay it all out and separate recyclables. So at this point, it's on the individual group to make that effort and to know what's accepted and how to dispose of different things in their towns or at their site.
So plastic pieces were one of the higher items this year than previous. And just wondering if that's because there actually are more small plastic pieces and microplastic out there, or that we're just more aware now that the smaller pieces pose as large of a threat as the bigger pieces, if not more.
Yeah, that one I'm gonna say I don't know, because it's hard to say whether this is something that again, there's no causality here in our data, so we can't just say, oh, well, we found more as a group, and so there must be more out there. That's a potential correlation, but it certainly falls far short of causation. And and I would say that there is more of an awareness, I think, around the harm that these smaller pieces of plastic can do. They're also harder to find. So if people are finding more of this, and it's because they're paying more attention to them, then that's fantastic, because that's additional effort too. I mean, it's a lot easier to see a bottle or a container than it is to see a little shard of plastic, but and differentiate that from a piece of a seashell, for instance. So yeah, I don't know exactly why, whether more people are picking them up because they're more aware of them, or because they're just all over the place and there's more of them. I think that given the trends we're seeing in larger pieces of plastic, like last year, we saw a decrease in almost every category of plastic. And this year we saw an increase in a lot of them again. So it could be linked to that, but it's also very possible that beaches were actually more clear of the large stuff this year. We heard a lot about beaches and areas being in relatively good shape as far as the large items that weigh a lot and are very visible. And so it's possible that people were just casting their eyes toward the smaller stuff. So it's all possible. I'm not sure exactly why that happened. That's a good question.
All right, we don't have any more questions in the chat box. So you've answered everything.
Well, I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining today. I know, just looking around now that I'm not sharing anymore, looking at the call and seeing who's on, I know that several of you are involved with this effort in one way or another, and or our upstream work. So part of this too is, the solutions and the ways to get involved that I laid out are not certainly not exhaustive. And when Bill Lucy gives his plastic presentation, the list is a lot longer. And it includes things like installing green infrastructure, because green infrastructure is an interceptor for plastics, sort of aggregating them in one place where we can clean them out before they get washed into our stormwater and sewer systems and have the potential to wash directly into the water. So there's a lot of ways to get involved in this, and it connects to a lot of our work. So very appreciative of everyone who gets involved with this on an annual basis. This effort really wouldn't be anything without all of you. So yeah, it was we're going to keep looking at this data, and I think, you know, teaser, we may also be we're hoping to also do some joint communications and data analysis with the Connecticut River Conservancy this year for the first time. So we'll get a full picture of the Connecticut effort. So keep an eye out for that. And thanks to Kelsey, who's on the call, for working with me on that. Yeah, I think that's it. So appreciate everyone joining. This, as I said, is our last webinar of 2020. So we will see you in 2021. And if not before, for several of you. And yeah, appreciate all the support this year in all the different ways. And looking forward to continuing working with you all in 2021.